the Clinical Consultation Network. This is actually our third day in a row of broadcast of the Clinical Consultation Network. And we happen to have, I don't know if he's a particularly well-known guest, but he is a great guest. Mr. Zach Stevens, he is a licensed behavior analyst. He works here in the Middle Tennessee region. He's am I getting your title right? The Director of Practical Behavior Analysis, or Executive Director, or what's his exact title?
I don't know. I chose Clinical Director as an official title.
Clinical Director, okay.
Yeah.
You want to maintain the connection to the clinical aspect of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's great. We're really glad to have you here today. And we're talking about telehealth a lot right now because, it's become suddenly just a really hot topic out there. Everybody is trying to adapt and figure out how to do it, for one thing, and trying to maybe get something going that could be really helpful to people. I mean, I don't know if all of applied behavior analysis services can be done via telehealth, but some of them can. And, Zach, as we have been planning and we've been trying to get an enabling technology grant going for you to be able to pilot some of this, this has kind of launched us into a period where we're able to sort of pilot this because with the coronavirus. So I think this is very timely, but it's certainly something that you've been interested in for some time. But before we launch into that, I want to remind you, you've been our guest on here before, but I want to remind everybody about who you are. So could you just give us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of your background and how you came to be involved with applied behavior analysis and telehealth?
Sure. Thanks for having me. This isn't my first time, but it's been a while. I got into behavior analysis when I started undergrad at Florida State University. One of the founding fathers in the field of applied behavior analysis is Dr. Tom Bailey, and he was the chairperson for the Behavior Analysis Masters and PhD program. So in a freshman year seminar type class, he came and gave a speech about it, talked about behavior analysis. I was already interested in working in the field of intellectual developmental disabilities. Seemed like kind of the right way to go, and also a lot of the things that he said aligned with the way that I thought and felt about the population already, given my previous experience working with children with special needs. And so I stuck around until I finally got into graduate school. And then right after I finished graduate school in 2014, I moved here, and I worked for the Columbus organization for about 4 years. And, then I started my own organization 2 years ago.
Yeah, and then you started practical behavior analysis. You basically took over most of the Columbus caseload at that time, and started your own business. So that was great.
Yeah.
And so now, before we launch into the business of this, I'd like to get one, without going into TMI, tell us one interesting fact about Zach Stevens that we might not know.
I like to cook a lot. Since I'm quarantined, I'm not going to the grocery store. Although I did go this morning because I really needed to get eggs. But I haven't been to the grocery store in about a week and a half prior, so I've been having the groceries delivered, and I'm finding that I probably would spend less money if I were to just get carry out instead. But I've been trying to cook lots of different things just to, so I'm not bored once I get done working. 5, 6 o'clock, I go in the kitchen and I just kind of figure out what I'm going to do based on what ingredients I have.
We're all on an episode of Shocked thanks to quarantine.
We are, yeah.
An episode of what?
There's a show on the Food Network called Shocked where they get just a random basket of weird ingredients and they have to try to figure out a meal from only what they have. So I feel like we're all kind of dealing with that with this situation.
That's right.
So what's one of the dishes that you prepared recently?
We are members of a community sourced agriculture delivery service. There's a farm in Pulaski called Roosevelt Farm, and you can pay and they'll bring you cuts of their own livestock as they process it, as fish and chicken. Well, the fish is probably not from them, but they do happen to have some fish. Usually have chicken and beef and pork products. Those are their animals that they raise there. And they have some connection to some seafood distributor. I'm not exactly sure where, and I probably should find this out because it's great, but the last couple of months they've had fresh ahi tuna, and so I like to make poke. That would be a bowl of rice with pickled vegetables and raw fish. It's a Japanese style dish. It's one of my favorites. So I like to do that. And I am making miso salmon with asparagus tonight. If the asparagus is still good by the time I get to the kitchen.
Well, that sounds great, man. So when this coronavirus isolation thing is over, all the social distancing is over, I'd like you to invite me over to have some of that. Sounds great.
That would be fun. I think that if anybody gets to know you outside of work, they'll find out you're a very cool guy.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that. So, all right. So you have kind of you had a head start on everybody, I think, with this telehealth thing because you gave us a very good proposal for how to do this, and we just ended up having to kind of delay implementation of that. And so, as has happened with a lot of things, I think the coronavirus has really sped us up on different aspects of trying to get different things done, and so telehealth being one of those. And so, tell us a little bit about some of your experience working with telehealth thus far.
Sure. For me, the concept of telehealth started when I was in grad school. In 2013, David Wacker at the University of Iowa published a paper where they are basically, through the University of Iowa healthcare system, are being able to connect with rural communities at the University of Iowa Medical Center, which is in a larger metropolitan area. But the thing is that at the time, and this is research that's been going on for quite a while. I don't have it in front of me, but one of my colleagues and I discussed this recently, that they've been doing research on this for a long time. And when they started the research, or at the time, they ran physical cables all the way from the University of Iowa, which I believe is in Des Moines. I could be wrong about that, but it's in a big city, and they actually ran physical cables to health right now, which in a way we're connected by hard wires. We might have fiber internet, or we might have cable internet, but the point being that we're not all connected to one centralized cable, but in this case they were. So we had studied that paper in my class, and actually, it dawned on me more recently that the big discussion we had in that class when we talked about the use of telehealth was, what can you possibly do with people via webcam that you would otherwise need to be with them in person? And so immediately going into the present day with what's happening with COVID-19 and all of us needing to be isolated from one another, we're kind of thrown into that without too much thought. And I know for a fact that most behavior analysts haven't really given this idea a try or attempted this in any way. The fact of the matter is that we've been, talking about this project, which I'm going to discuss in a second. We've been talking about this for over a year, and I wouldn't even consider myself to be ready, given the amount of research and planning we've already done as part of the project. So I think it's pertinent to talk about some of the pitfalls and also some of the successes we've had. But at first I want to discuss the project that we have been working on. So first of all, in the end of 2018, I started contracting with a residential provider who has an office here in Nashville, and they're kind of large, and they have several offices, and they needed somebody to oversee the behavior services for a small town in West Tennessee, Trenton, and they needed a behavior analyst to oversee the behavior specialists that they currently had on staff. So that's how I came into this. And we found that because the relationship is a contract, there's really no rules other than in terms of legally what I can do as a behavior analyst. There weren't any rules that said that I couldn't bill for that service, which is the problem now that or up until last week, I should say, where we weren't really able to bill for telephonic or telehealth services. So we started using that because actually I could make site visits, and I made several, but the real reason we actually got on webcam is because I wanted to see if I could host the Circle of Support meeting remotely. So ultimately what we did was I went to their office on a Polycom system, and they had their system set up in Trenton, and there were about 10 or 12 people, including the person supported, and we had a meeting that was meant to discuss how we were going to support this individual through a very difficult time. We wanted her to have buy-in, but I wanted to be able to guide the meeting, and I thought that if she could see me as opposed to hearing me via conference call, which is what I would typically do, I thought that that might be more effective. And so the result of that was that we found she actually at first was really unhappy about the situation, but I think that was more behavioral as opposed to actually displeased with what we were talking about. But when it came down to it, I was able to, after she decided to excuse herself from the meeting, I was able to talk to the staff and the support individuals that were there and get their opinions on it. So it made it more of a personal experience.
Let me ask you about that, because I think that has been one of the questions I have heard, and particularly, and maybe kind of translating this into a couple of different things. So the activity you were engaged in was trying to do some planning with this person about how things were going to be, what their life was going to be like going forward, so forth. So I'm wondering so was the person able to attend to you pretty well in that interaction? Was it a positive for that person?
Well, she attended. Part of the issue at that time was that in a group of people, she engaged in a lot of inappropriate behaviors that would produce a lot of attention from others, and so she yelled and cursed, and we just sat there still and cold and waited for her to stop, and then we would wait a few seconds, and I would try to approach it differently. Ultimately, once she realized that we weren't going to get a big rise out of it, her big move was to just leave. They asked her to come back, and when she did come back, we just said, we're only here to help, and if you don't want to participate, that's okay. Someone will fill you in later, and that's what she agreed to do after she had calmed down. So part of it was, again, the reason I suggested doing that anyway was so that she could see me as I was instructing her and her circle of support, our circle of support. So I didn't expect it to be very stressful for her, but I think it was. And I also think that when there's a lot of attention on her, she starts to do things maybe as a result of feeling uncomfortable being around a lot of people talking about her to her face.
So the factors that affected that interaction were more related just to the social interaction you were having with her. There was not really. Sounds like there wasn't much contribution of the fact you were doing it via telehealth was not affecting the interaction you were having with her that much, according to what I'm understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
The interactions I had in person with her went pretty similarly. The other thought that I had at the time was, I don't know what her perception of the concept of telehealth was, and so before we started the meeting, I asked one of the people that she trusted to explain it to her and to say, Zach is going to be on this big screen in the office where we typically meet, and we want to make sure that you're okay with that. And she seemed to understand that, but again, if you were to tell someone, hey, the person you typically see in person is now going to be available by computer, I don't know what the effect on that person's behavior would be or how that perception would turn out. So I wasn't sure, and that's kind of why we approached it that way.
But in this circumstance, she did already know you in person. I mean, you had already met her in person. Yeah. So there was less of a leap under that circumstance
right
on the screen.
Yes, and I know that the presenter we were supposed to, unless I missed it, was yesterday, the person from Station MD.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Dr. Matt Kaufman was our guest yesterday, and he spoke about the Station MD service that they're putting out there. And that will be on our website for people to listen to at some point.
It is already posted on the Station website under the nursing drop-down.
Michelle Bagby is on top of everything. She's already got that up and running. So if people didn't get to hear that, you can go back to that from yesterday. And proceed, Jack. I'm sorry for interrupting.
I just wanted to point out that with a situation like that, if you've not met the provider that you're meaning to meet with via telehealth, I think that could be a challenge to trust in one way, or in several ways. One being that behavior analysts have to have a level of buy-in either from the person that we're treating, usually from the person we're treating, but also from the people that we're working to treat the person, staff, caregivers, parents, etc. And so if we didn't have any rapport at all or we have never previously met, I don't know, and there's not any research that I've found that could tell us the effectiveness of actually that quote-unquote blind date effect on quality or the effect of treatment.
Right. So when you're using the word met, you mean an in-person meeting that would precede the eventual telehealth meeting that you would end up having.
Right. And that also, as we're kind of getting to this project that we've been alluding to and not yet defined, that's kind of where we came up with this idea. So, okay, let me just do this. First of all, I had been thinking about how I was going to make myself more available to this particular caseload in Trenton. And the only way at the time, other than occasionally being able to do this via webcam, was to go there. And Trenton is about 2 hours and 40 minutes each way for me. So when I decided the best course of action would be to go there and be on webcam less often, it really made me think, like, how can I make this more cost-effective and efficient? Because wasting over 5 hours in the car just for a couple of hours FaceTime, it makes it very taxing. It's a long day, so there are variables that I'm not able to control that may have an effect on my own quality of service and my own behavior. So this is kind of a funny story. I was on my way to CalABA, which is the California Association for Behavior Analysis. I was going out there for the conference. This was February of 2019. And I was in the airport, and Bruce actually called me to check in on this client that I had been consulting on it with.
I don't think I realized that at the time.
Well, so I was in the airport getting on my flight to go to CalABA, and I was actually saying how effective that meeting was with this particular individual. And so I said, is there something that we can do to make something of what this situation is? In other words, can we put something together that would allow rural access to quality care? Because everybody knows that it's really hard to get people coming out of graduate school or people that live in currently metropolitan areas to go outside of that area.
Right, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because that was the original motivation behind trying to get something together, was to try to figure out ways that we could help people in rural areas get greater access to applied behavior analysis services.
Exactly, and so when we had that initial discussion, one of my colleagues and I got together, and put a proposal together. And at that time, so this was January 23rd of 2019. This was right when Governor Lee took office. His first order, executive order number one.
Right.
The first thing that he wanted to do was address the state of rural impacts of services. In other words, his order was for all of the executive branch departments to come together and give a statement on what they were doing to address rural service delivery to people who are already either DIDD recipients or eligible for the services that other people in metropolitan areas are able to access much easier than them. So we thought that kind of lit a good fire under us to be able to, or motivate us to be able to put something together that would address that specifically. And so after a couple of weeks, we put together a proposal, and Bruce and Michelle and my colleague and I got together to see if we might find something to do. The problem at the time was there were some mostly some wording in the laws about service delivery. I'm not positive if it's in the law for behavior analysis, but I know that the law, it has to do with clinical services, that it has to do with the place of origination. In other words, where services are delivered and where the services are received.
Yes, and so there is a law, a Tennessee Code annotated amendment to the telehealth law. So we do have a law that was passed in 2016 that authorizes telehealth. What it did not authorize was to be able to provide telehealth it had to be from one licensed location to another licensed location. And so that meant if you were at your licensed location, you had to provide the service to someone who was sitting in a mental health center or another place that was licensed to be able to be a site for receiving the service. And what this current amendment to that law is about is allowing people to be able to receive billable services within their home. Which is, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about applied behavior analysis services via telehealth, is generally you being at your location, providing the service, and that person being at their home.
Right. And the reason that we needed that wording to change in the law is because most of the time a person's challenging behavior, I'm not going to say all the time, obviously, but a lot of the time, challenging behavior is most likely to occur in the home setting because that's generally where people spend most of their time. And with our population, despite the fact that many of them are in the community from several hours a day, the majority of the times that problem behaviors are occurring with this population seems to be at home in the morning, in the afternoon, at night. So we thought that if the rule excluded us from being able to provide the services in-home, then we would have a situation where we weren't sure the efficacy of what we were going to do. So that kind of became the first snag in the line. The proposal was essentially, and this is what I was saying before, we wanted to create a hybrid model of service delivery that includes both face-to-face and telehealth services. The reason is because, like I said before, I don't know how you could build a rapport without having spoken to someone or met with them in person. I don't know how you could get the same level of buy-in, and I didn't really want to, I shouldn't say didn't want to, we weren't sure the effectiveness of what that would look like. So the idea was that we would attempt to have a new client who had previously never received services, meet with them once, conduct some assessments and observation and interviews with them and their staff via telehealth, and then develop a treatment plan in the same way we typically would for all of the rest of our clients. And then after that, moving forward, service delivery would be incumbent on the ability to observe the individual in their environment, also consulting with their staff, which is what we do already as community providers. The only difference is that we would see them in person at least once per month, and then the rest of the services would be delivered remotely. And so we thought that being able to see them in person and, hoping that we could get to know them, that we would be able to develop the rapport and then therefore their buy-in to their programming. and we, naturally there's already a difficulty in getting buy-in from caregivers because they don't always trust that we're there for the right reasons. Sometimes the staff don't accuse us of not knowing the person. Of course, we don't really know the person; we just met them. But they might accuse us of, just trying to make them do whatever we want them to do. And so I like the idea of being able to meet with somebody and get to know them. They get to know me. That way, when I'm telling them this is what I think we should do to treat this problem behavior, that we've got, everybody is involved and seems to have bought into the program. Basically, the reason that the project stalled was because it wasn't going to be legal per se for us to be able to provide the services that we were going to bill to the state of Tennessee, and that's because it restricted us from providing services anywhere but a licensed site. Then in the summer, this was July of last year, we had a meeting with now I can't remember their names, Bruce. You'll have to remind me. Maybe you tell this part.
I'm trying to remember who we had a meeting with. Michelle's my memory. Michelle.
Don't count on Michelle. You're going to have to give me more information than we had a meeting.
Okay, sorry. Bruce thought that we might be able to find some funding for this in a grant.
We had a meeting with Dennis and Harold.
And Harold Sloves, yes. Dennis Watson and Harold Sloves. All right. They're in charge of our enabling technology grant in Tennessee. So we get a recurring $500,000 a year to fund different telehealth, but technology projects.
Right.
And so this was one we were proposing to Harold and Dennis for enabling technology.
Yeah. Lily, that's a good question. Lily in the chat area asked if that means it does not include licensed group homes. I don't know the answer to that, but I think the wording is a licensed healthcare type of practice, right, Bruce?
Yes, I believe so. I believe you're correct in that.
So they're licensed to provide, home health, let's say, or they're licensed to support individuals and care for them, but they're not necessarily licensed as a healthcare center. Although some of them might be, we haven't really explored that concept. That's a good question. Anyway, so we met with Dennis and Harold to discuss using funds from the enabling technology budget, and basically our idea was to try to start with 3 cases, and we would just stagger them. We would start one, start the next, and just see how it went based on a protocol that we had developed. They actually wanted to double it. They wanted us to try with 6 people, obviously because the more data we have to support our hypothesis, the better that it would look in terms of being able to make decisions about whether this is an effective service. We just kind of, hit the brakes for a little while.
And then in classic state fashion, we said, we want you to double it, and now we don't want you to do it at all.
Right. They just sort of put us on hold, which is fine because it really gave us some more time to mold our ideas and come up with some new angles to approach. And in that period of time, over the last 8-9 months, my colleague and I, one of my employees, I keep calling her my colleague, her name is Emily Rowland. She's also a licensed behavior analyst, and she works with me at Practical Behavior Analysis. Emily and I have met several times to discuss the idea, and even more recently, I know Dr. Emerson from United Health is on the call. We've discussed recently the possibility of funding this project through United Healthcare as a means for accessing healthcare in rural areas. Now, that brings us to Friday the 13th at 5 p.m. when somebody's grand idea was to announce that all of a sudden all available services for behavior analysts and other clinical providers will be able to be provided via telehealth. So the reason, and this might be kind of selfish, but I'll admit that, but the reason that I wasn't super keen on it is because we hadn't even really tested the idea as to whether it would be effective. And the whole goal behind our behavioral telehealth project was to test it and make sure that it would work. And Bruce said this earlier, there are some things behavior analysts absolutely can do remotely, via webcam, even via conference call. Most of those things involve consultation and training. But there are some things that we do with our clients that kind of need to be face-to-face, and therefore telehealth isn't the best method of service delivery if the person isn't able to attend to the camera. To be able to sit in front of the computer, look at me, if I'm saying, I want you to do this, or I want you to do this, they have to be able to attend to the computer, they have to be able to attend to me, they have to be able to attend to the stimulus, look at this, do this. And so inherently there are some risks with trying to do that with people who we're not confident can do that yet, either through assessment or through knowing them. So my concerns were if all of a sudden all of the behavior analysts across the state were now being told, go ahead and do this. We haven't really tested it yet. So now I'll also admit that at the time, policy-wise, there weren't any orders like stay put like we have now. Businesses were still open, restaurants were still open. Many of our people were still going into the community at the time. And so, in an effort to be as effective as possible, I had a meeting on Monday the 16th with my staff, and we brainstormed what to do. I talked to Michelle several times about it. Basically, we just needed to know, are we going to be able to consult with staff remotely, and how effective is it going to be? So, ironically, we're going to have a huge sample size here, and we might actually have something research-wise to discuss, given that most of the visits across the entire state with the adult population, and even with many of the children we work with, are now accessing telehealth ABA where they previously weren't.
Right.
So there is some promise to that. I will also...
So you've had some experiences with this already, and we'll get to this in just a minute, so you can feel free to put me off. But I'm thinking that depending on the task that you're trying to do with the person, there might be a differential response. I mean, so if you're trying to teach them to, let's just take wash your hands as an example, since that's such a topical thing right now. If you're trying to teach them to wash their hands, that's going to require a lot more attention than maybe some other more passive types of activities or observations you might do, or other things of that nature. And so that gets to what's the task that you're trying to do with them. I don't know if you've had any experience yet with that in this short time frame, but if you have, kind of highlight that. Uh-oh.
You don't have your audio.
Zach. Did you mute yourself, Zach?
Oh, I guess I did. I don't think I did.
It was like that Forrest Gump moment when they pulled the plug on him and he said some very important things, but nobody heard it.
Okay, I have a couple of examples, and then I'll tell you about some of the thoughts that we've brainstormed as a team recently. First of all, and this happened yesterday, I only had one way to video chat with my clients in Hartsville. They are not super technologically advanced, and only one of the caregivers has a smartphone with a camera. So the way that we did it yesterday was we had to connect via Facebook Messenger video, which all of the recommendations we were getting from DIDD, from TennCare, they're saying maintain HIPAA-compliant software when possible, except that we realize not everybody has access to that. So I was able to connect with him via Facebook Messenger. So I just called in. They basically stood the phone up on the side of a book, really. And I had the client, I had the caregiver, I even had the conservator. We were all kind of able to see each other. And I talked them through a change in procedure that I would like to recommend, which is important because we've been talking about it for weeks, and we were just about to implement a change in the behavior plan before I was not able to see him in person anymore. And so the concept was, and I made sure the individual knew what we were going to do, although I'm not positive he understood that, but his conservator did and was able to agree to that. But basically, where we were previously just using a simple planned ignoring when he would engage in disruptive or inappropriate behavior, I actually changed it because I found that one of the caregivers was more preferred than the other, and the one who was most preferred tended to be the one who intervened most often. So my idea was that I would have the least preferred person intervene so that the most preferred person was only really available when the problem behavior was not occurring. And I don't know how this has been effective yet. I did send a text earlier. I haven't heard back from them yet, but I'm looking forward to hearing about it, and I hope it works. The concept here is that is something that I thought would be doable via telehealth, and the reason is because I'm not really needing their hands to be touching my hands to be able to show them how to do it. I was able to model it with the staff several times before we even really tested it. We role-played it, so to speak. And I feel confident that it could be done via telehealth. Whereas teaching somebody to wash their hands, and this particular individual I met with yesterday, when I was there the previous week, or 2 weeks before that, I actually walked him over to the sink in the kitchen and I asked him to wash his hands and to show me how he did already. And what I did I didn't provide any physical prompts whatsoever. I just said, I want you to do this. I want you to do this.
Okay.
Okay. And so when I figured out that he was able to imitate that just by seeing me do it, I know that he would be eligible or that me prompting him remotely would be effective for him. And so, on a case-by-case basis, which is how we should always operate, that tells me that not only do I think I would be able to train the staff and model and role-play with the staff, but I do think if the staff person were to walk him over to the sink and bring their phone over to the sink with them, that he would be able to see me providing this kind of prompt to him in order for him to be able to wash his hands. But the only reason I knew that is because I had tested that in person first. Had I not been able to do that, I would have run that same test, but I would have just went right to the telehealth version of that, prompting him on the camera to see if that would be effective. So there is promise for a lot of different kinds of things we could possibly do, but it's not a sure thing, and it's definitely not going to work for everybody.
You're able to, though, maybe, this is a question I have, and you may not have had this occurrence yet, but, a lot of times there's a lot of value in being able to coach staff a little bit kind of in a more naturalistic scenario, whereby they're kind of just going about their business. I'm wondering if you've yet had the experience of trying to do that with someone, so like kind of just coaching them during interactions that they're having normally throughout the day or typical observation.
Sure. So I have not done that in the last 10 days that we've been under this particular order, but over the years I've absolutely had situations where a client has called and said, okay, I just want you to know that this situation is happening. This happened recently. This is with a child that I work with. Also happens to be in a very rural area that I'm only out there once in a while, once every other week. And by the way, the reason I took that case is because there is not a BCBA anywhere near there. And the services they were getting right before I started with them, they were driving from Lafayette to Cookville, which is about 90 minutes each way. And they were going to a clinic, and the problem behaviors were occurring only in the home. In fact, the kid was more or less an angel when he went anywhere. At home, he was having a much tougher time. And so I said, just like as a behavior analyst, I just felt very guilty that anybody would prescribe that for them. So I decided to take this case. But besides the point, I told the mom, I don't really get paid for this, but anytime there's a situation and you don't know what to do, please call me so I can help. Because I would rather spend unpaid time helping them in a situation than making them wait until the very next time that I see them to go over something. So your question was, have I been able to coach somebody through a behavioral event while I'm not present? The answer is yes. And so the way that this was happening was the child was trying to tip over his bunk bed, and he was doing that because he was told he couldn't have a particular dessert, let's say. And when he tipped over the bed, the bunk bed hit the other wall in the bedroom and, smashed a hole in it. And the mom said, "I don't know what to do." So what I did was I pulled up his behavior support plan and I read word for word what I had told her in our training. And then we talked through it. And as she was there, I told her, "Okay, I want you to walk up to the bedroom and I want you to provide a prompt like, let me know when you're calm so I can help you fix the bed." And then we waited, and he screamed and he cursed at her, and we ignored him. And then I said, "Okay, it's been 30 seconds. I want you to try the same prompt again." And so I walked her through exactly what I would have done or that she should have done in the moment as a result of what the behavior support plan says. And after about 25 or 30 minutes, eventually he was calm enough, and they were able to get past that. And then she sent me a message later to let me know that once he was calm, they fixed the bed and whatnot. So that was that's what I feel like most things could be done.
That's extraordinarily valuable. And like you, I've had numerous circumstances where I've been called on the phone and asked for assistance in a circumstance like this. And it's often very effective. And then, though, this adds a layer to it. And, one of the things I'm thinking about here, Zach, is like, we've got all the technology we need now to be able to do lots of different things, and there could be even circumstances where a person is connected remotely, has where the voice communication with them is coming through a headset or something of that nature. You're able to observe the situation visually through telehealth and to provide input it's where it's not apparent that you're providing the coaching. And I think, there's a value in being able to do it in that fashion, because it's a lot more like I'm really doing this. I'm really in vivo with this rather than just, taking instructions and removing the sort of, the stimulus that you're the one that's managing this, but actually the person who has the relationship with that person supported is the one that's intervening.
I
just wanted to add to that. I think the coaching option is a great alternative. I can speak to when I was in the community and I had a case with a child who was very disruptive in the church environment, and it was a big issue for the family. That's something that they had a routine of going to, and I had gone with them on numerous occasions to try to walk them through how to manage the behavior in that setting, but the child would never engage in the problem behavior in my presence. So I ended up having to put a Bluetooth headset on Mom, hide several pews back to where the child didn't even know I was present, and coach her through when I saw the disruptive behavior starting, how to prompt the child in that situation. And the face that he gave his mom when she started saying some of the things that I typically say was priceless, first of all. But it was very effective. It was like, who taught you this? But it was a very effective strategy for him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and we repeated the same thing in the grocery store and some other community settings, and it was very effective. So I think that's a great option if possible and appropriate for clients in this situation.
And I only see those things being enhanced now with, the types of technology that we have available.
I do have one example of that actually from today. And so I've had many experiences similar to this, but in this case, we're leveraging both telephonic and telehealth services. So let me describe this. I had some
Can I pause you real quick, Zach? I think Rick Amato has a question. His hand is up. So I will unmute him, Rick, if you want to ask a
Rick
question.
come in and ask his question. Yes. Go ahead, Rick.
Two things. One is, Zach, there is a research base for what you're talking about. Back in 1969, there was a book published, Behavior Modification in the Natural Environment by Roland Tharp and Ralph Wetzel.
I'm familiar.
They described the triadic intervention. And, of course, they found that rather than doing direct intervention themselves telephonically, because we didn't have video back then, what they found is that they could coach people who were mediators in someone's life to implement behavioral procedures, which also created enormous sustainability because they were changing the natural mediators in the environment. They were changing their behavior. So the point I want to make is there's a research base for what you're talking about. I recommend you pull it up and use it as justification for what you're proposing to do. It's there. I also wanted to share my own experience doing that kind of work. A long time ago, when I was first getting started back in the late 60s, we had a thing called a little FM radio. I'm sure some of the older people on the call remember that little 6-transistor FM radio that fit in a pocket. Someone created an FM wireless microphone. So you could set the radio for a specific channel that which the microphone was tuned, and you could stand 50 feet away and talk in the mic, and the person would hear it through the radio. So with a headset on, it became a way to give people instructions. I used to sit in the back of classrooms and instruct teachers what to say and do. And just like in the example where that Michelle gave, where the parent suddenly started talking like her, it was great to watch the shock on kids when I would say to the teacher, without turning around, say, Bill, please stop talking to Mary. Had a profound impact on the teacher's effectiveness in the classroom to do that just once or twice. But that's a little humor from my case. But I really recommend pulling in the Tharp and Wetzel data. They did lots of cases. It happened to have included people on Indian reservations where they could not send in therapists back at that time. And I think it testifies a lot of what you're proposing. Thanks for the few minutes.
Yeah, that's an excellent story, Rick. And at some point, I hope you'll share some of your experiences in Pavlov's and Watson's laboratories with us.
That would be great too.
Well, I have another session to do that.
That's right. I have a few other people that have their hands raised, hopefully intentionally, because I'm going to unmute them and ask them if they have a question.
Before you do that, I just want to quickly, just in response to what Rick said, we know that there is a lot of research on this. I think the concept wasn't that we didn't have research on the use of remote coaching or anything like that. We definitely do, and we know it is very effective. I think, and maybe it was misinterpreted. What I meant was that they wouldn't pay for it. They wouldn't pay for telehealth as a billable service. So our idea was to have somebody to be able to fund this so that we could show them that this is what we're going to do. It's just as effective or not as effective. And so it would allow for funding, not that we don't have any research, because obviously we have 50 years of research of that,
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jennifer Jenkins, I'm going to unmute you. You have your hand raised. Hopefully it's on purpose. Did you want to ask your question? Nope, she remuted herself. We're going to go with no. That was not on purpose. All right, Joanne Lewis, you have your hand raised. Also removed that hand. Okay, so I don't think we have questions. Go ahead.
High probability of accidentally raising your hand.
Are we done in 5 minutes here?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're getting close to the end, but this has been great. It's been just I think very good time of sharing here today.
I really appreciate the opportunity. I really just wanted to say one more thing, and that's
sure.
What we've done in our agency is case by case determine whether somebody has been appropriate or is appropriate for this method. I do have some staff who work with younger kids who definitely aren't going to attend to this, and the parents and my staff are taking all sorts of precautions to prevent any illness and spread. Though we can never be sure whether people are carrying it, those individuals who desperately need face-to-face services are absolutely getting them where we're able to provide them. And also, for some of my staff who are not competent using telehealth, we are attending webinars, getting CEUs, learning as much as we can, and we're putting together some policies that specifically address how to approach telehealth. I did put out some language in terms of what we needed to do. As of yesterday, we have official word that now all 3 of TennCare's MCOs are allowing for telehealth, but I've also been informed twice today, if you're a member of Tennessee Association for Behavior Analysis, I'm the one who sends out most of the information to the email database, and you might have gotten a couple of notifications of webinars. A couple of people wrote me back today to tell me that it's actually not part of the behavior analysis licensure law to be able to provide telehealth, so we actually kind of have a quandary on our hands where we're being told we need to stay home and only call and video with people, but we're also being told we can't really do that. So I know that some people are kind of talking from a legislative perspective to address that, but we are dedicated to doing absolute best.
The licensing law prohibiting it, though. I think that's a matter for some further consideration. But that would be my not legal opinion.
Right.
I just wanted to add in here because I know Zach had mentioned some webinars coming up, but I have been in communication with some VAs at Triad, and we are planning on offering a webinar to talk about the ethics of telehealth for behavior analysts on April 3rd at 1:30. So we're going to be sending out an announcement about that. So that will be upcoming, and I think that'll help us out and navigate through this challenging time, and especially for those who have not had a chance to research or really dig into what it means to provide telehealth services.
Yeah. So this has been a great discussion today. Zach, I appreciate you coming on so much because this I think gave people a little bit more, kind of put a little more life behind what we're talking about here. I get what you're talking about with ethical considerations, and we need to be very careful with those and be concerned about whether we're providing an adequate service to people under the circumstance. But let me say that, based on some of the things that were shared here, some things you shared, some things Rick shared, and that we all talked about, was ways to enhance the work that you're doing through the use of telehealth. Not just that it's an okay alternative, but there may actually be ways that we can do better work if we utilize this technology. And so I really want to congratulate you on the work that you've done. And we haven't given up on a pilot project at some point if we can ever get there. If we get to July 1st, maybe we'll have some more money for this. But it's certainly still on the table, still something we're thinking about. And hopefully these experiences we're having now will just enrich that, as we move forward. So thank you all. Thank you so much for being here today, Zach.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. This is the Clinical Consultation Network. We do this every Tuesday at 12:30 Central Time. And you can join us here. You can see our broadcasts all on our website at tn.gov/DABD. /something else, clinical services, maybe, I'm not sure. Once you get that far, you can find it, folks. And we really appreciate you being here. And who knows, we may have another special session later this week, so I'll get that out to you. Thank you so much. See you next time.